And happy May 18th. Welcome to another exciting edition of Rate Desk. I'm your host, Michael Thomas, here to talk about multifamily interest rates, among other news. First, markets end on a session high. All three major indices are up. As these reopen and open up orders go out, you're seeing positive economic sentiment, and that's reflected in the markets. Specifically, the crude oil futures are now up in the $32 a barrel range. Just wondering last week if they're going to even get to 30. Nice to see that. U.S. 10-year Treasury yields up a little bit. 73.73 is where that 10-year yield is trading at today. Still at an all-time low, but up a little bit from recent trends. Jumping into the interest rates, 223F pricing at about 251 today, fixed for 35 years. Looking at the 221D4 fixed for 40 years. That is quoting at 316 today. Going over to the Fannie Mae rates, looking at 321, 3.21 on 10-year money, and the Freddie Mac rates still in that 325, call it to 335 range. Not much of a difference there from where they were last week. Now, some positive, exciting news I want to tell you about. On Friday, May 15th in the evening, Congress went and passed a new form of relief that's very specific to the housing industry and was advocated by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition Group. And we got something done in Congress. Wow, imagine that. So the act is called HEROES, and it stands for the Health and Emergency Recovery Omnibus. Are you writing this down? Solutions Act. Okay, HEROES. And it's $200 billion. That is billion with a B. I want to talk to you about $100 billion of it that's specific to folks at the lower band of the AMI range, specifically people and families under the 50% of the area median income range. This act is specific to them. They are providing relief in the form of not only 12 months of moratorium on evictions, but also they will pay their rent. This grant does pay the rent, and they will pay the rent for up to 24 months. That's quite a long time. And that can include up to 6 months of back rent and fees, but there shouldn't be any fees because you're not supposed to charge people fees like that right now. However, that is allowed to be included in that payment. Congress has to enact this money out the door within 7 days of last week, so the clock is ticking. They've got to get 50% of those funds out the door, which is great. And then once the grantees have been selected, they have 30 days to actually remit the payment. So there's a lot of things I like about this. Only thing I don't love is when you first read notices like this, they can be very confusing because you're trying to understand who is included. So when I first read the notice, it said that 40% of the money goes to people at 30% of AMI. Then it goes on to say right after that, 70% of the money goes to people at 50% AMI. I was like, okay, well, wait, what's 7 plus 3? And then it goes on to talk about remaining funds. Here's what it boils down to, okay? An easier way to understand this is the bulk of the money, 70% of the money, is serving folks at 50% of AMI. Within that, they're going to serve the very low income 30% AMI with 40% of the 70%, okay? Above that, the delta between 70 and 100 is 30%. The remaining 30% can go to serve people in the 80% AMI range, okay? Workforce housing, and the HUD secretary is the one that has authority to do that. Also, Secretary Carson has the authority to go up to 120% of AMI. Here's what's interesting. First, it says you've got to then demonstrate that the funds have been sufficiently met for people at the 80% of AMI. What's interesting to me there is that there are no federal subsidies currently for people and families at the 80% of AMI. So how on earth are you going to measure have they been sufficiently served to then move on to the higher bands of AMI and the higher income families? Just interesting stuff, kind of wonky policy stuff today, but very positive for our industry. And it just goes to show that if you've got a strong advocacy group together and you propose stuff that really is going to make sense and really help the country, you can get bills passed, and that is fantastic and great news to see that. I'm going to end on that positive note. This has been another episode of Rate Desk. I'm your host, Michael Thomas, signing off.